Today's agenda, it should be pretty simple. We're going to be here today. I'm going through our brief introduction, and then we're going to be handing it off for you to hear from your neighbors directly. If you've been on Move's webinars in the past, you'll often see us talking with transportation providers like Metro Transit or elected officials or people who do this as their everyday job. But a big thing we want to do when we're starting to talk to you is we want you to have the opportunity to hear directly from people actually doing this, as opposed to people sitting behind their desk. We want you to be able to hear from your neighbors, and that's kind of the conversation we want to start being able to hear today as well. So you can expect to see some of these community conversation webinars with us as well. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we'll have ample time for the audience question and answer at the end. So please feel free to add those to the chat throughout so you can get your own feedback answered as well. If this is your first time here, you might be wondering, who is Move Minneapolis? We're just one player in this conversation of transportation, particularly downtown Minneapolis. We're a federally funded nonprofit that is sought to help people choose sustainable transportation options. So particularly downtown, we know there's a lot of congestion, and we know that not everyone's going to have space to park their car. So we're here to help create opportunities for folks to be able to choose options that are sustainable outside of driving alone. So for example, walking is what we're talking about today, but we might also be talking about transit or biking or carpooling or anything else that is out there getting you around. So what we do, as I mentioned, we do a lot of work with employers. On the screen, you're seeing me and my coworker, Catherine, chatting with some folks at their usual orientation to just think about how bus routes might be able to get them to their commute, make their commute work and get them from home to the office in a customized one-on-one consultation. So we do these services with employers, but today I mostly want to highlight some of the things we do with residents outside, residents who live downtown, and they might have their work commute there as well, but more so being able to have conversations with folks who are here and making transportation choices as their part of their everyday life. We have a breadth of commuter resources. We offer those one-on-one consultations that you'll hear more about your opportunity to engage with in just a moment. And then we do sustainable transportation promotion through events and often different things like that. Diving deeper into some of those opportunities you as a resident can engage with, I want to highlight a service that we're calling our customized consultations. So this is something that we've always done, but we're trying to make it a lot easier for you to be aware of and engage with. So particularly for folks who have downtown transportation needs, this is an opportunity for you to schedule a one-on-one dedicated time to chat with one of our team members virtually or in person, whatever opportunity we have a downtown office. So those are going to be 15-minute windows you can schedule online. You should see a link in chat to be able to learn more about that, where you can or you can check out our website, and it'll be on our front page there as well. So if you want to ask a specific question, you can here today, but then also if you want some more dedicated time to talk about it, this is a great opportunity. We host educational series and workshops. So on the screen, you're seeing a conversation we hosted with the Easttown Business Partnership. So this is an opportunity to hear directly from some of Metro Transit's leadership as they're thinking about the future of their opportunities. This is just one example of something we can do to create for free with your community. If you, your neighborhood organization, you as yourself want to get involved with bringing something like this to your neighborhood, please feel free to reach out. We'd be more than happy to work with you and your neighbors to make something like this happen. And then we do on-site events at other things that are already happening. So this on the screen is a picture of us at one of last year's Open Streets events. And upcoming later this summer, I'm hoping to see a lot of you at events like National Night Out, where you can keep an eye out for the Move Minneapolis table and come and take a look and chat with us. If you enjoy the conversation today, our YouTube page is a really great place to go and check out a lot of the resources that are already out there as well. Um, and then lastly, just want to highlight that we are out there on all of the socials, particularly our newsletter. We're going to have one coming out later this week. That's a monthly uh, uh, list of all the transportation resources from whatever agency or whatever interesting things are going on. If you want to know about what's going on in transportation downtown, this is the place to sign up. So you should see a link for that in chat as well. With all those logistics out of the way, I want to just briefly start by talking about why are we talking about walking today. Walking, I think, often gets overlooked because it is a big part of every trip you take. We talk a lot about sustainable transportation in the world. There's a lot of people getting excited about electric vehicles and opportunities to reduce their carbon impact. And often walking and being a pedestrian gets overlooked, even though it is the option you can take to get around that has the lowest carbon impact compared to other transportation modes. And one thing that I really like to remind myself of is everyone is a pedestrian at some point in their day, because every trip includes walking. As you can see behind me, I often use my bike to get around, but I need to remind myself that every time I bike to a business, I get off and I'm walking down the sidewalk in front of their business to get in. Or every time I'm going to catch my bus and waiting at the bus stop, I'm a pedestrian while I'm there and I'm walking as well. So I might think of those as bus trips or bike trips, but I inevitably I'm a pedestrian at that point as well. And then downtown, we hear a lot about vibrancy and people who want to be bringing people downtown and talking a lot about creating a vibrant business district. And walking is a key component of making all of those moving pieces work as well. So we're here talking ourselves, but want to just remind you all of a few of the things that those transportation agencies that we're in partnership with are doing to make this easier and be able to make it a great option for you as well. On the screen is the Complete Streets policy. So this is a hierarchy that the city published and updates regularly of how they're prioritizing changes to the transportation system. So going from the top to the bottom, you'll see whenever there's an engagement, a program, a complete street redesign, this is how the folks making transportation decisions in our city are choosing to prioritize things. So at the top is exactly what we're talking about today: walking, rolling, being out on the street yourself, followed by kind of some shared uses like transit and biking. Below that, personal vehicles, and lastly at the bottom is freight. So all of these are still important, but really wanting to think about those reasons of why we're prioritizing making walking easier. Joy is one of the keywords today. So we're talking about these reasons we should be able to talk about walking because of all the reasons it makes our community better. But I want to start with the fact that often getting outside or driving alone is what people say they want to do. So just on the screen, you're seeing a transition of a survey from 2019 of how folks most frequently get around compared to how they would most prefer to get around. And you'll see a big reduction in how people want to use their personal car and increases in things like walking and biking as well. I mentioned this earlier, but just wanted to visualize how walking is both the best option you can choose for reducing your carbon emissions, but then also additionally being able to choose to take up the least amount of land use and square footage that's needed to make that happen. So all of these options on the screen that reduce carbon reduction are helpful in being able to get to the carbon-free future that we're all working towards. But then also when we're talking about downtown, we need to be thinking about land use as density and vibrant space is such an important piece of that conversation as well. Lastly on that, on being able to talk about downtown, this is the city's pedestrian priority network I have on the screen. So if you're commuting downtown or if you're living downtown, you might not always think of it as really a pedestrian kind of hotbed of being able to live in a walkable street. But when the city itself thinks about what streets are frequented by pedestrians and our priorities for making sure that these are amenable, is downtown almost every single street is something that they consider a pedestrian priority. And then with that in mind, thinking of what is pedestrian friendly can often be hard to quantify. It's often something that you know when you feel it, I think, but on the screen you can see a reference to kind of streets that are considered pedestrian friendly. And often those are the same streets that when you think about them as vibrant and welcoming to businesses and exciting to be in sitting outside at a restaurant as well. So wanting to just kind of lastly say on the screen, you'll see a visual representation of streets that are qualitatively considered pedestrian friendly or not, based on what type of infrastructure there as well. So if you're looking for opportunities to think about more deeply where you feel comfortable and where you want to walk, this is a great thing to think about as well. So I know you're hearing a lot from me when the thing we're doing today is talking with your neighbors. So I'm gonna get back to starting the conversation about why your neighbors choose to walk and who you're hearing from today. So with that being said, we're gonna start with just some brief introductions from the folks who you see on the screen here. I'm going to give an example myself. My name is Carl Hedlund. I use he, him pronouns, and I actually live in South Minneapolis. I live in the Midtown neighborhood. And I'll ask those same three questions to you all. If you can start with sharing your name, your pronouns, and then what neighborhood you live in, it would be great. Max, are you willing to get us started?
Yes, hello all. My name is Max Singer. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in the North Loop.
So Deanna, can you
Okay.
follow up?
Sure. I'm Deanna Newman. I use she, her pronouns, and I live over in Loring Park neighborhood.
It looks like you're muted there. Can you?
My apologies.
Oh,
Hello, my name is Gennaro Thornton. I use the pronouns he, him, and I live in downtown Minneapolis. I guess it would be South 6th Street.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'll ask you just to continue that conversation. I know before this we were chatting a little bit about the fact that you just moved here, so I'd love to hear from you with the next question, going around the horn, about why did you choose to live where you live downtown?
Great question. Short answer is proximity. And adding on to that is also, and when I say proximity to my job. My job is, I think, maybe 2 light rail stops, and I am close to a light rail station. And then in addition to that, I wanted to live, being my first time in Minneapolis, I wanted to live somewhere where there would be an opportunity to be involved in the community and interact with the community. And with my experience, the city, the downtown area is the central area of high traffic, community engagement, community interaction, restaurants, parks. So I zeroed in on downtown area of Minneapolis.
Awesome. Thanks for getting that started. Deanna, do you want to answer the same question of why you chose to live downtown?
Sure. We moved downtown in 2008. We were coming from the Lowry Hill neighborhood, which really wasn't that far away. But during the time that I lived there, I would walk downtown all the time, and I would walk through Loring Park and through the Loring Greenway to get to downtown, and it was beautiful. I just fell in love and said one day maybe I would be able to live on the Greenway. It was almost serendipitous that when we fell in love with this condo and that looks out onto the Basilica and down onto the Loring Park, that I realized our back door was on the Greenway. And so, no, it's like living in a park. I love this neighborhood. Yeah.
Awesome. And Max, I know you're relatively new to the North Loop as well. Do you want to share why you chose to live there?
Yeah. I'm 26 years old. My calculation was I kind of triangulated this location, if you can believe it. I have a job in St. Paul. I have most of my friends live in Loring or nearby in that part of South Minneapolis. And so I wanted to be able to get to St. Paul easily, but I didn't want to move to St. Paul. All respect to St. Paul. So I was looking for access to transit and bikeways. The Green Line leads right to my job, so I was looking to the proximity of that. And believe it or not, the best deal I found on an apartment in proximity within like a 10 to 15 minute proximity of the Green Line at the time was in my current North Loop apartment. So I was kind of balancing work and life, maybe a little bit stronger on the life side, but that's how I ended up here in North Loop. Yeah.
Awesome. Wanted to jump off into that next question, Deanna. I got so excited hearing about kind of that same experience. I had a similar story of living along the Loring Greenway and having that be my daily commute earlier. I'd love to hear from you all about just starting with tell me a little bit about your favorite routes to walk in your neighborhood, and if you want to get us started by talking about the Loring Greenway. I think it's something that not everyone knows about.
Oh, it's basically this lovely linear park and that's maintained by volunteers. So it's like I have a garden, except that I don't have to work it myself. It's a place where we meet informally. I almost never walk out on the Greenway without seeing one of my neighbors out there sitting by the fountains or whatever. And it's my primary way to get downtown. And so, my living next to the park, Loring Park, I mean, our regular routes would be around the park. But I have to tell you that one of our favorite routes is actually through downtown to the river. And then down the river, either one side or the other, and back. So it it I just have too many choices. And usually we can figure out an errand to run on the way just to justify being out for hours walking and doing nothing else but walking. But yeah, um, easy walk to the Walker Sculpture Garden, where we debate whether the rooster is purple or blue. So.
I can share that similar sentiment of finding errands to run. I accidentally find myself stopping at the grocery store almost every day on my commute as well. I know to the others, just want to continue that conversation of some of those favorite routes, and it can be walking for the sake of walking, but I know you both also mentioned walking to get to your transit connections as well. Do you have any particular highlights of routes you like to walk downtown that you'd like to share?
Is that me? So
Sorry to the others, Dan.
right, that's what I'm thinking.
Go ahead, Max.
Okay. All right, Gennaro. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of fun little corners in the North Loop. For all the pedestrian activity, it's not necessarily always as idyllic as the Loring Greenway, which is singular and worth checking out if you have not taken a stroll there. But my walking route to the light rail is along Fifth Avenue, that first street north of the train trench, and it's nothing special. There's kind of funny. There's like two hills, but one of my favorite little spots along it is at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Fourth Street, where there's it's like a street, and it actually is a continuation of Fourth Street into downtown, but there's no bridge or anything, so it's a dead end. But there is, from the middle of the street there, on one side it's just sidewalk. There is a view of the Minneapolis City Hall clock tower, just in the middle of, framed by
Yeah.
the street. And it's just a little spot. Like, I try to take photos at night, and it never quite looks as good when you take a photo of it. But it's nothing extraordinary, but just walking on the way to the train or way back from the train to see the tower framed by the buildings on either side, it just a little spark of joy. And the other thing I'll say about living in the North Loop, there are some fun shortcuts. The tower tunnel goes through one of the industrial buildings there. It's open to the public. It's roughly around 7th Street North. And it cuts through all the way through to Second. And in fact, you kind of keep going over all the way to First. So there's these pedestrian only kind of walkways throughout the neighborhood where otherwise you couldn't get through on a car or a bike, which I'm a sucker for a shortcut. Sorry, that's my roots.
For me, it's because I'm new. Well, first of all, to get to my light rail station, I usually take what is it? I cross 6th Street, and I think it's Park or Chicago Ave. And I take it to the stage. It's real short route. I'm able to see the park that is across the street from Wells Fargo, and I'm able to see a bunch of apartment buildings, and that's the short route to get to my job. The other routes I take purposefully to get lost. So my favorite and scenic route is anywhere toward North Washington Ave. I walk North Washington Ave, maybe 4, 5, 6 blocks. And then, and I walk 4, 5, 6 blocks north, because I'm heading toward North Loop. And then I will cross Washington Ave, and I'm in I think it's the Minneapolis Depot. And then I'm going toward Mississippi River. So I think I'm on 2nd Street or 2nd Ave. And I'm just walking, I don't know, I guess it's about maybe 4 or 5 blocks within that radius of the bridge and the Mississippi River. So the bridge, I think, is northbound, and the Mississippi River is, I think, maybe westward, because the Mississippi River is on my right. I walk those routes just to try to familiarize myself with the downtown, North Loop, and I guess Mill District area, because I think those areas are close to each other in conjunction to where I live in my neighborhood. So I guess some of my favorite routes is North Washington Ave, Hennepin, and I think that's 4th Street, because I think I'm passing I think it's the Aloft Hotel.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
I think there's something to be said there that hearing about different routes from you all in your neighborhoods, but being able to live in a place with so much density like downtown where you have the option to explore of being able to get to and from and all those different options. I can definitely relate to that joy of um, heading out to get lost. For myself, when I travel, that's always the thing I try and do, and being able to think about doing that here at home is something to remember, one of those everyday joys of being able to get lost in your neighborhood. Um, to keep the conversation going, I know we're talking about walking today, but at the start we talked. I heard from a couple of you about why you chose to live where you did in walking distance of transit or other ways you can get around. And particularly for folks who might be thinking about different ways to get outside of downtown. So when you're living downtown, if you can share any more about how living in a walkable neighborhood that's near other transportation options, how those complement each other and being able to get around without a car and making walking a core part of that. Max, do you want to get the conversation started on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I live in the North Loop without a car. As a matter of fact, it kind of was I did have a car before moving downtown, that I was not using so much. So I kind of made the very conscious trade-off where it's like, well, I could, with some trade-offs, I could live in this fun neighborhood, but I couldn't afford a car, or at least not even to park it. So I was able to, the parking out of the budget, and then all the other maintenance stuff out of the budget. And that flexibility, first of all, allows me to take advantage of different opportunities. It's a realignment of my budget, but I found that living without a car in the North Loop has been uh pretty easy. As I mentioned, I'm able to take public transit to work. I'm able to take the Green Line. I, you know, I like Carl. I like to bike around the city. Actually, no, Deanna bikes as well. I like to bike, and so that is a great way for me to get it to various neighborhoods and neighborhood destinations, even in the winter sometimes. Yeah, and the one of the great things about being downtown and near downtown is the access to transit. The transit network it serves downtown very well. I've been able to get to places. I think people are even kind of surprised at some of the places I can get to. Earlier this spring, I went on a date at the roller rink in Burnsville, which is, I'll have you know, right across the street. It's not the nicest walk in the world. Right across the street from the Orange Line station, which runs every 15 minutes or so. 20 minutes by the time you get to the 10 or 30 hour when it's time to say goodnight. But I if you'd asked me before, like, oh, you're gonna go to a date on a roller rink in Burnsville, I would not have said yes, but it can be done. I did do it. And having backstop options like the EV car share, this is all the EV car share zone, which I've used on occasion, as well as ride share services, as well as the Lime bikes, which are useful if you get someplace and then don't have a plan for getting home.
I always say
I'm
Google is my friend. Google's my best friend. I can always go on there and say, this is where I want to go. It'll tell me how to get there by bus. It'll tell me, which bus to take at what time. I don't know how I lived without Google to get me around everywhere. And the night, I used to take the light rail home from the airport. And even in the dead of winter, you get off of the light rail, you're 1 block away from the Skyway system. And so it could be 0 degrees outside, and you could hop off of the light rail, run into the Skyway system. And for me, I can get all the way home, basically in the Skyway system. Love it.
I know the skyways can be more of a hurdle with limited hours nowadays, but for this being this far into the conversation, I really I want to highlight that came up often when we're talking um, with folks thinking about coming to downtown for the first time. They're particularly concerned about if the the parking they can find is Skyway connected. But I'm glad that we've been able to have this conversation with walking downtown outside of just the Skyway as well.
Yeah.
So, anything else to add? Otherwise, we can keep the conversation rolling. Um, heard about a lot of different kind of trips that some folks might think about as car trips because of some of the things you're going to do. Um, would love to, if any of you have any tips or tricks you want to share about being able to make trips like errands or different things where you might need to carry things or being able to get there um, in a presentable manner outside of your own car. So I've heard about being able to find errands to run on the way or being able to get out on dates. Are there any tips or tricks any of you all want to share from your lived experience of getting around outside of your car?
Well, I always do if I have a lot to pick up, I do the old lady thing where I have I have a little cart that I take with me. It's one of those little folding things, right? And I can put in, several bags of groceries or a big bag of dirt or anything else in that little one. And I just ignore the fact that I look like a little old lady doing it.
Well, I think you could either call that I think you could also brand that as the European way is the way
Oh,
I
okay.
think about it.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. Um,
Max, it looks like you got something to jump in on.
Uh, First, Deanna, I love those carts, and I'm like, where do you get them? If I ever open a store, I want them to be in the front window because they just such a part of the fabric, and I feel like why don't they sell them at the grocery store? At least I don't see them. Maybe I'm in the wrong aisle. So I want to know where you got your cart. But
yeah.
um, two tips I can think of right off the bat, specifically for groceries. I walk to the grocery store pretty much. That's my way of getting groceries. Sometimes I'll figure out another way, either bike or otherwise, but primarily walking. My first pieces of advice are the hand basket at the grocery store is optimal sized for like one or two bags, reusable or paper otherwise. So I find, shopping into a hand basket is a great way to visualize what you're gonna have to carry home. And you make more frequent trips, but if it's a 10-minute walk and it's a walk you enjoy, it's so worth it. It is like walking to the grocery store, that is something you have to claw it out of my hands clutching my grocery bags. The other thing though, shopping for groceries, pace your liquids. Maybe you can do milk and orange juice, but if you're doing milk and orange juice, you might have to skip the LaCroix. I don't drink sparkling water anymore because I don't want to lug it every week, and
That's right.
that's good for my budget too. Cutting down on the sparkling water. Tap for me.
Any
I don't
other?
have any tips. I do the traditional. I walk there and I Uber back.
Okay.
I have not figured out, like you said, Max, to cut down on the liquids. And I know when I take the walk, because I do shameless plug, I guess. No, I'm not gonna plug. I do the grocery store that has the very common first name, Traders in front of it. So
Okay.
I go there and I shop. I'm always going there with a specific amount in mind where I can walk back and I get to going and I get to shopping, and next thing I know, along with, because I try to trick myself, I got my own little cloth shopping bag. I don't have a cart. I think I need to invest in one, Deanna. Thinking that, hey, I'm just going to fill up my cloth shopping bag. That's it. If I can just fill up the cloth shopping bag, I can walk back. Doesn't ever end that way, Max. So I end up with my cloth shopping bag plus about 3-4 paper bags. So I'm like, hey, let me catch a share ride back. So yeah, I wish I had some tricks.
Well, I think being able to take Uber one way is definitely something that I consider. I always like to remind myself that there's always options out there, particularly, and I'll make sure I follow up with this information afterwards, but there's actually a program called the Guaranteed Ride Home Program, where if something were to happen in a non-drive alone commute, if you're registered with Metro Transit, you actually have the option to get reimbursed for one of those emergency shared vehicle rides or taxi rides you can take home as
Oh,
well. So
interesting.
I'll make sure I follow up with that information as well. I know my coworker Catherine is there in the chat. We might be able to see a link to it there as well. Not to put the pressure on, as I did not prepare this one for to be included as well.
We do
Well,
that. We do that with restaurants. Sometimes we'll walk to the restaurant and know that if it's too dark, it's too cold, or just we, ate too much, that we could always Uber home. More than half the time we don't. We just turn around and we just walk back. But at least we know we could always get a share, right?
awesome. I just gonna want to share a reminder for everyone. Feel free to drop some questions in chat if you have any thing. I've a feeling some questions might come up around our next question. So we're here about kind of being able to take Uber, and we've been being sure to highlight kind of a positive spin about some of these joys of being able to get around downtown. Want to make sure we take some time to talk about the challenges as well. So for example, having too much to carry is one thing, but I know there's a lot of other challenges that being a pedestrian on our street present as well. Max, are you willing to get the conversation started about kind of some of those downsides and how you think about being able to navigate them, getting around as a pedestrian as well?
Yeah. First of all, I need to acknowledge, I'm a white man, right? So in multiple ways, I am not confronted with certain like pedestrian challenges that other folks are, in terms of like particularly on like safety's perceptions of safety and feelings of vulnerability. So that's something I need to acknowledge right off the bat. And obviously I walk with other people, but I also I know I can't. I may not be able to provide as detailed strategies on some of those approaches. What I will say, definitely there are some challenges. Particularly one thing about my neighborhood, or right outside my door, is has an active nightlife scene, which in my experience generally has been a public safety positive. There are very often many people out in the street at even late into the night. I don't have an external facing window, so I don't have to deal with the sound as much. But I never have to. There are multiple people on the sidewalk doing various things when I'm unlocking my door at night, which is actually feels safer than if it would be if it was a darkened street, in my opinion. But the flip side of that, the active nightlight district, is the drivers who you never necessarily know if they're familiar with downtown or if they themselves were participating in the nightlife, which is a unfortunate challenge. So I am extra aware when crossing the street at night, or specifically those like weekend nights, those weekend nights to be like stare down the car. You know, you might have the pedestrian walk signal, but the driver may not be attention. So always kind of I take things extra carefully and deliberately at those times when there are folks, particularly drivers, who may have been either maybe distracted or imbibing. And that goes not just for street crossings, but the parking lots as well. Because whenever I cross one of those, I never know, you know, people I fortunately have had very few close calls, but if someone's really trying to get into a parking lot, they can make a very bad right or left turn into the parking lot. So I always try to at least, you know, have a look over the shoulder. At this point, it's second nature when either crossing a street or a driveway. At those times, and I'll pass it to whoever wants to.
So, I'm with you, Max. I sometimes I start waving my hands and saying, "Didn't you can't do that. You can't make a right-hand turn on red there. You know, you just pulled into the bikeway. I mean, I'm constantly saying, oh my gosh, people need to be educated about who has priority on our streets." Sometimes. I also think that sometimes it's difficult in the wintertime to walk in Minneapolis. I'm, 69, and I see a lot of old people walking around my neighborhood. And
You look
fortunately, we
good
are
for your age,
inside.
Deanna.
Yeah. Um, we live inside the DID, so our streets there's a privilege to that, right? Our streets are cleared, they pick up trash, being inside DID. But then the snow piles up on the sides of the road and on the corners, and pretty soon you have a lake there. And there's a lot of challenges to walking in the city during the winter time, just because of who we are in Minneapolis. And you just, you put on boots and you try to pick your route, because it's I've seen so too many people slip and fall. So.
And DID, the Downtown Improvement District. So that's a group that actually does some snow clearing for folks within that zone. But for folks outside of that, you'll be excited to see that I mentioned earlier at the start some of that pedestrian priority network that the city has. They're actually going to be piloting doing a very similar snow clearing along those routes, so more folks will be able to be able to experience something like that in the years to come as well.
Great.
Gennario, do you have any other kind of downsides or negatives of being out on the street you'd like to share?
What's the adage? Excuse us for our progress when they're doing major construction, or excuse us for while we're progressing. Or I forgot the adage, but so that's about the major one for me, which I'm okay with it, because my grandfather told me, when you go into a city and you're looking and you're trying to make a decision if this city is progressing, look for cranes, look for construction work, look for scalpels and constant type of construction that lets you know that this city is investing in themselves. It lets you know that the city is wanting to be cutting edge and they want to progress. So since living and walking and navigating the downtown Minneapolis area, I deal with more so that, and it forces me, again, when I get lost or to get lost, I'm able to learn alternative routes that are side streets. I don't necessarily have to look for Chicago Ave. I don't have to necessarily look for Washington Ave or Hennepin or Portland. I can navigate by taking South 7th Street. I can navigate by taking a one-way, which is 8th Street and Marquette, and would not have known about those adjusted alternative routes if I didn't run into a bunch of construction. And that's about it. I don't have too many run-ins with I don't know, for a lack of a better word, seediness when it comes to different areas. But my most common run-ins is usually construction. I was blessed to not have a real certified winter, as most Minnesotans would say. This has been mild. I did my research before I came in here. I remember the blizzard of 93 based off of YouTube. I wasn't here, but I saw pictures, I saw videos. No, 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 no. Like I've that type of snow, that type of snowfall uh is not to be taken lightly. Didn't really have to experience any real cold this winter. So but I will say this, if you're walking anywhere in the direction of the Mississippi, despite winter months or summer months, just be prepared for the wind.
Sure.
Be prepared for the wind. I've walked those routes where all of a sudden the wind is hitting me in the face. Before it was a little bit coming from the east or the west direction, and then when I find myself walking toward the Mississippi, it's that wind gets a little bit stronger. Other than that, no, it's just downtown Minneapolis has actually been very kind in terms of the people, in terms of experience. So far, so good.
I want to continue off that conversation of seasonality. You know, we're going into summer around the corner here. We've got a lot of spring rain going on. We're talking about summer walking, but Max and Deanna, I'm curious if you want to, thinking off of that tips and tricks note, if there's anything when you think about change of season. I know for myself, who as someone who walks and runs a lot, I've got clamp-ons that I put on the bottom of my boots, and this is the first year I really invested in some good boots, and I can tell you how big of a difference it made for myself. Thinking about kind of tips for someone who might have a real Minnesota winter next year, or some of the other seasons to come. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. So I don't own a pair of like clamp-ons, yak track type stuff. It is continue on the list of like, should I? But definitely wearing snow boots, even if you expect every sidewalk to be shoveled, is useful. Just for, you know, corners, such. The boots I have are waterproof around the ankles, which, you know, you never want to step in a puddle, but sometimes you just have to. And for someone, I am will be the first to admit I don't always give myself enough time to get to the train, and I should. But small steps when there is ice or the potential of ice, tiny steps. You know, give yourself the extra minute and a half to put in some tiny steps in those icy patches, because you can't always keep your stride. And maybe the last thing I'd bring up, this is maybe more superstition than anything, is just like like just have an idea where icicles could be, because like fortunately I've never been around a terrible icicle accident. I don't know anyone who's been hurt by an icicle accident, but they're up there and they fall and you see them on the sidewalk. So it's always like, there's a couple overhanging awnings in the North Loop. Keep an eye out for icicles. That's that's a scary way, even if it's very improbable, right? But that's what I got.
I do a lot of layering because I'll move in and out of heated spaces and then out into the cold and into heated spaces again. If I'm in and out of the skyway system or I'm doing some shopping, I always have multiple layers so that I can strip down if I need to.
Well, we're coming up on our last 5 minutes. I've got just one last question for you all. A big part of the work that Move Minneapolis does is we're resources for commuters themselves, but we're also the liaison with a lot of agencies and transportation providers themselves. So kind of in the essence of keeping the conversation going, of wanting to always making downtown more welcoming for other folks, no matter how they want to get around. I'd love it if you could share one thing that could change to make walking easier for you or more joyful for you as well. I know I didn't prepare you all with this question, but if anyone wants to jump in with a final note of one thing that would make all of this we talked about today easier or more joyful for you as well.
Oh, I might bring up something controversial. I
Oh,
think we
please.
should take buses off of Nicollet Mall. I think it would certainly make walking around downtown much more pleasant.
Definitely. I know that's going to be a conversation that continues and has been going on for a long time. We've got some folks from Metro Transit in attendance today, and I know that it's something they're thinking a lot about what other options could be. And you all can expect to hear some more information about options and digging into how our agencies are thinking about that in the near future.
Great, yeah.
Anyone else think of kind of a one thing that could make walking downtown more joyful for you?
Um, I don't, I would like to see more colors, more art,
Yeah.
in the downtown area. Maybe some greenery, flowers, but more so art, because you want the downtown area to look and entice and invite people to want to walk and not drive downtown. And if you have art, if you have murals, you have people that would be more prone to want to walk so they can see that up close versus in a car. It's not a lot of that in the downtown area. And yeah, and if we want it to be walkability, if we want it to be viewed as a walkable area, let's kind of spruce it up with some colors.
More different things to get lost and find out of your way. I would definitely get along with that, of some of those joys of being able to find art along the way. Max, it looked like you had something to add as well.
I want to support what both Gennaro and Deanna said, but in the spirit of originality, I would say specifically North Washington Avenue, making it easier to cross, because there's great businesses and places on both sides of the street. And I think the two things that would make it easy, well, three things that maybe make it easier to cross. I know you said one thing, but this is three sub things. The signal timing, how long it takes for the lights to change. It feels like it's time for like people zooming down Washington Avenue when there's so many more reasons now than when my dad's office was down here in the 90s, to actually cross Washington Avenue to patronize the businesses, to see what's on the other side. Signals, room at the places. In the corner at 5th and Washington, closest to where I live, is it's not ADA accessible for one, but it also there's not room for people to even fill out while waiting for the light to change. If you were, whether walking or in a mobility device, it would be difficult to get around the corner because people stop for the signals. interconnected there. And there are places where you're supposed to cross Washington Avenue without a signal, and they could certainly make it safer. They have some of those plastic poles up currently in the middle of Washington, which is a great start, but I sure hope it's not the finish. That's it.
Well, we're coming up at the end of our time here today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us and giving us all your time. I'm sure you're just some of the voices in your neighborhoods, and one thing I know is when I'm out walking is being able to have that shared experience with people like you. I love how often I run into people that I know when I'm out, and I hope to see all of your faces out and about on the street getting lost in the near future as well. For all of the attendees, you can expect a follow-up email with some of those resources that were mentioned today, as well as some of those top highlights from this conversation. Just a brief reminder that this recording will be available on YouTube if you want to share it with anyone. And lastly, you can expect a short survey. We were just coming up with some of those kind of big conversations at the end here about things that could change. If there's something you'd like to continue the conversation with, there's an option in there around what else you would like to hear from us with. So feel free to be able to share about the conversation that we had today, as well as please feel free to share any other topics that you'd like to hear more about in the future. With that being said, I'm going to get us out of here, and looking forward to seeing you all at Move Minneapolis's next webinar.